Lars Newman wasn't a man who liked night shifts. He was 42, with a bad back and worse knees, and had spent the better part of 20 years delivering packages across Hamburg. UPS, DHL, some private medical courier work, he'd done it all. Now, divorced and living alone in a second-floor flat that always smelled like old radiator water, Lars found himself taking night work again. It paid double, the dispatcher said. Confidential lab runs. No signatures. No questions. Just packages marked with biohazard tape and strange Latin initials. That first night was easy. 3 drops, all to known addresses, research labs in Altena, Eppendorf, and a small one near the university hospital. Lars had to wear gloves and keep the air conditioning off in the van, but it was all routine. Just samples, the dispatcher told him. DNA stuff. Medical testing. Lars didn't care. They could be smuggling frozen panda blood for all he cared. He wasn't paid to ask questions. He was paid to drive. But on the 4th night, the route changed. There was an extra package. Small, about the size of a shoebox, and marked only with a handwritten tag. Dr. Ilse V. Vogelkreis Institute. There was no address on the label. Just GPS coordinates printed in tiny numbers at the bottom. Lars had to punch them into his phone to get directions. The clinic wasn't listed on Google Maps. The road to it didn't have a name. It was somewhere near the forest edge outside Rissen. Past the last tram stop. Past where the streetlights ended. It was past 2:30 a.m. when Lars left the last official drop-off and turned his van toward the woods. The GPS app flickered twice, screen glitching, before reloading with a cold blue route line, snaking deep into unlit forest. The air grew colder as he drove. The van's old heater started making that ticking sound again, like a nail caught in a spinning dryer. Lars turned it off. The road narrowed. Asphalt turned to gravel. Then gravel turned to mud. Christ, he muttered. They really want their blood sample in the middle of nowhere? After 15 minutes of forest roads, he spotted it. A small turnoff with 2 rusted iron gates, half open, hanging crooked on their hinges. Beyond them, up a gentle hill, stood a building. It was squat and gray, built in that brutalist post-war style, like a forgotten bunker. The lights inside were faint, flickering yellow squares behind dirty glass. Lars pulled up slowly. No sign. No parking lot. No name on the building. He grabbed the box, still cool from the van's refrigeration unit, and stepped out. The night air smelled like wet leaves and something faintly metallic. The ground squelched beneath his boots. A single light buzzed above the entry door. As he approached, it flickered. Buzz. Darkness. Buzz again. Like it couldn't make up its mind whether to die or keep fighting. He rang the bell. No answer. Then he knocked. That's when he heard it, his name. Lars. A whisper. So soft it could have been the wind. He turned around. No one there. Just his van sitting in silence, steam rising from its hood. He knocked again, harder. The door creaked open. Not a click, not a buzz, no mechanical sound. It simply opened, as if waiting. Lars hesitated. I get paid either way, he mumbled, stepping inside. The air inside the clinic was thick and stale, like a hospital wing that hadn't been cleaned in years. Faint bleach, but under that, something rotten. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered like dying fireflies. Every third bulb was out. The hall stretched forward, empty, ending in a T-shaped split. No reception desk. No signs. No people. Just a yellow line on the floor, painted long ago, cracking and peeling. Someone had once written words along the line, something in German, but now the paint was faded. He could make out only a few letters, Kreis, and OPR. He held the box tighter and followed the line. It led him past old doors, each labeled with crooked metal plaques, Archiv, Einzelierung, Probenlager. Everything was silent. Lars began to sweat. The walls felt like they were closing in, like the whole building was breathing around him. Then he heard it again. Lars, calm rain. He froze. This time, the voice wasn't soft. It was clear, though strange, accented, maybe Slavic, maybe something older. It came from behind one of the doors. The door to Probenlager. He tried to open it. It swung open easily. Inside was darkness. No lights. Just rows of empty shelves, broken refrigerators, and something that looked like an operating chair with leather straps. The box in Lars' hands began to shake. Not violently. Just a faint tremble. And then he felt it, a breath. Right beside his ear. Hot, moist, and not his. He dropped the box and ran. He stumbled down the hall, heart punching his ribs. The box lay behind him, cracked open, leaking a dark gel that smelled like rust and burned sugar. He turned a corner and stopped. There was a woman standing at the end of the hall. She wore a white lab coat. But her face was wrong. Too smooth. No eyebrows. No expression. She stared at him. Not blinking. Then she raised her hand and pointed, not at him, but behind him. Lars turned. The hallway was now endless, stretching into blackness. And things moved in that blackness, thin, long-limbed, crawling on the ceiling. He bolted back toward the exit. But the doors were gone. No entrance. No foyer. No light from the outside. Just more hallway. And behind him, the whisper again. Closer now. Zikarat, Lugali. He didn't know the words, but they rang inside his skull like a bell. He stumbled into a stairwell and began to climb. The building only had 4 floors. But he passed 5. Each one darker than the last. Each one whispering louder. Enki, Alalu, Tukulti. Words that didn't belong in his mind. Words he'd never heard but now somehow understood. They weren't commands. They were memories. Old ones. Like a dream you didn't know was yours. The 5th floor door was open. Inside, he found a single light. A chair. A radio playing static. And a wall covered in photographs. All of him. Sleeping. Driving. Eating lunch in his van. Even one of him as a child, age 7, standing beside his mother on a beach in Kiel. He hadn't seen that photo in 30 years. Who the hell had these? Something moved behind the photos. The wall breathed. A shape emerged, black, oily, spider-like. It whispered, "You belong to the first memory." Lars screamed. Then everything went white. Lars Newman was found barefoot, naked, and shaking beside a bus stop near Blankenese. He was muttering in Sumerian. No one recognized the words, but a linguist from the university confirmed it, a dead language not spoken in over 3,000 years. He had scratches on his arms and strange spiral carvings along his back. When questioned, Lars said only one thing. The wall watched me sleep. The clinic he described was never located. The GPS coordinates led only to a stretch of forest with no road, no gates, no signs of any building, only trees. And in the center of that space, someone had drawn a spiral in the dirt, as if burned into the earth. Dr. Greta Johansson had seen war veterans, child trauma victims, and more drug cases than she cared to remember, but nothing like Lars Newman. She reviewed the case file again. Subject was found 7 days after going missing. Showed signs of dehydration, shock, possible psychosis. Mutters in a dead language. Drawings of spirals, eyes, and ancient ziggurats fill his notebooks. Refuses to sleep. When sedated, he screams uncontrollably. In her first session, she asked him a simple question. "Do you remember where you were?" He stared at her, unblinking. Then whispered. "The place between the ticks of the clock. Where the eye doesn't close. Where they press memory into skin." Later that night, Greta listened to the audio tape from the session. There was static on the recording. Faint, almost hidden behind his voice. She played it backward. In the static, something else spoke. He brought it back. A week later, the van was found. Not by the police, but by a group of hikers exploring the woods near Risen. It was parked perfectly, as if ready for delivery. Doors locked. Headlights off. But the forest had grown around it. Roots were wound around the tires. Ivy crawled across the windshield. Mushrooms sprouted through the front grille. Like it had sat there for decades. Inside the van was the courier manifest. All drops were logged, except one. Package number 7, Dr. Ilse V. Marked undelivered. The strange thing. The glove box contained a human tooth, perfectly white, etched with a spiral so small it required magnification to see. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Lars Newman. But Lars was in a secure ward across town. When confronted with the news, he smiled for the first time. Not joy. Not relief. A calm, empty smile. Then he whispered, "He has the rest." Greta dug through archives, trying to find anyone named Dr. Ilse V. in Hamburg's medical records. Nothing came up. So she broadened her search. That's when she found something. Ilse Vogelkreis, born 1893. A biologist and occult researcher tied to a fringe institute during Nazi occupation. Disappeared in 1945. Presumed dead. No body recovered. Her last known address? A clinic in the woods near Risen. One that was bombed and sealed in 1943. The files said it was built over ancient earthworks. Something to do with Mesopotamian rites, memory containment, neural taxidermy. The site was demolished after the war. Officially, at least. Greta printed the files and planned a visit. She went alone, just before dusk, following Lars' original GPS coordinates. No roads led there now. Just trees, twisted and quiet. Not even birds sang. At the center, she found it. A spiral burnt into the forest floor, made of blackened stones and ash. She knelt, reaching out to touch it, when the wind changed. It began to spin, not in the air, but in her ears. In her skull. And she saw it. Not with eyes but behind them. A clinic that wasn't real, but still existed. A place made of memory. Held together by repetition. A building that appeared only for those who believed in it, or those who touched what came from it. Like Lars. Or her now. She backed away, shaking. But the spiral was on her palm. Burned in. Lars Newman no longer speaks. Not even in Sumerian. He sits in his padded room, smiling at the wall. Sometimes he hums, exactly in time with the ticking of the wall clock. He hasn't aged. Not noticeably. Not like he should. Every full moon, he lifts his arm and taps the skin where the box once sat in his hands. Then he whispers, "Deliver." Greta Johansson quit psychiatry. No one's seen her in months. Her apartment was found empty. Except for a map of Hamburg with dozens of red pins, all marked with spirals. And in the center, where forest meets road, a single pin with a note attached. The memory wants to spread. 6 months after Greta's disappearance, the courier company received a strange delivery request. It was unsigned. Sent by registered post. The instructions were detailed, specific. Night delivery only. Single driver. Gloves required. No stops. Box marked, subject number 9, for the wall. They turned it down. 2 days later, their entire server system crashed. Office lights began to flicker. And a courier, new hire, 22, fresh from school, received a package at his doorstep. He took the job. That night, he never returned. Only the van was found. Parked beside an open gate in the woods. Fiona Calder wasn't afraid of the dark. She was 28, tall and strong-boned, with a Highlander's calm in her voice and not much use for superstition. After a bitter breakup and a series of sleepless nights in her dingy Glasgow flat, she'd taken a temporary job through an agency, night security at the Ardglass Point Lighthouse Museum on the Isle of Skye. It sounded peaceful. She liked lighthouses, liked the idea of them, standing tall and stubborn against the ocean's fury. Plus, It paid well for a boring gig. All she had to do was walk the halls a few times, keep an eye on the monitors, and log her rounds every hour. There was only one rule. Don't go past the 3rd floor. The woman who handed her the keys, some short, gray-haired administrator with a face like cold toast, said it plainly. The stairs to the lantern level are sealed. You'll see the sign. Keep to your patrol route. That's all. Fiona had nodded, pocketed the ring of brass keys, and thought nothing of it. Rules were rules. And besides, what kind of security guard climbs lighthouses at 2 a.m.? By day, the lighthouse was harmless. It had been decommissioned in 1987 and turned into a maritime museum shortly after. Visitors came to see dusty compasses, brass foghorns, chipped mugs used by keepers long dead. The walls smelled of mildew and sea salt. The wind hissed through narrow windows like a bored ghost. But at night, it was different. The sea was louder, angrier, and the silence in the tower wasn't the usual kind, it had weight. The kind that made you check over your shoulder for no good reason. Her first shift passed quietly, mostly. The cameras flickered now and then, but the old system wasn't reliable. She made notes in the logbook, walked the creaky wooden corridors, stopped to stare out the window at the endless dark sea. Then, at 3:12 a.m., she heard it. A ship's horn. Low, mournful, distant but clear. It came from somewhere beyond the rocky cove, where no ships passed at night, not anymore. She paused at the window, squinting into black water. Nothing. Just waves breaking against the cliffs. She told herself it was a ferry, maybe a delayed freight vessel. But the feeling in her stomach disagreed. It felt old. By the second shift, Fiona had settled into a routine. Check the rooms, flick through the CCTV feeds, drink too much vending machine coffee. Her phone barely had signal, which was a blessing and a curse. She liked the silence, until it started sounding like whispers. That night, she was reading a paperback when she heard it. Footsteps. Above her. Heavy, dragging boots across wood. But the 4th floor was sealed. She'd seen the rusted chain bolted across the stair door herself. She stood at the foot of the stairs, holding her flashlight, listening. Step, drag, step. Then silence. She climbed 3 steps, then stopped. She wasn't supposed to go up. The sign was clear. Do not enter. Structural unsafe. She called out, just in case. Hello. Anyone up there? Nothing. Then, from somewhere above, something knocked. 3 slow, deliberate thuds. Knock. 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 Fiona turned and walked away. She didn't sleep that morning. She found it on her desk. A small leather-bound book, wet around the edges like it had been pulled from the sea. She hadn't left it there, and no one else had keys. She picked it up, opened it carefully. Inside, yellowed pages. Cursive handwriting. Smudged ink. She scanned the first few lines and froze. It was her handwriting. Her name. My name is Fiona Calder. I am trapped in the tower. I cannot leave. The sea won't let me. They are watching through the fog. She dropped the journal like it had burned her. Backed away. The CCTV monitor crackled behind her. For half a second, one camera, the one on the 3rd floor landing, showed a figure standing at the top of the stairs. A man. Soaked. Wearing an old mariner's coat. Face obscured by dripping hair. Then the screen went black. The next morning, Fiona called her supervisor and asked if someone had been inside during the night. No, the woman said coldly. Only you. Why? Fiona hesitated. Just thought I saw someone. Maybe a reflection. The woman paused. You're not reading the keeper's logbooks, are you? Fiona blinked. What? Nothing. Just stick to your rounds. The phone line clicked dead. That night, a storm rolled in, thunder growling over the water, lightning painting the tower in sudden white flashes. At exactly 2:44 a.m., the horn blew again. Closer this time. And with it, came a voice. Muffled, warped by distance, but unmistakable. Fiona. She ran to the window. A ship was out there. She could just make it out, a black shape on the waves, no lights, wrong direction. Ships didn't come that way. Then another flash of lightning. The deck was full of figures, drenched, unmoving, watching. The next shift would be her last. Fiona made up her mind that if the journal was there again, she'd quit and never look back. But it was gone. Instead, something else waited. The chain on the 4th floor stairs had been broken. Laid neatly on the 3rd step, like an invitation. She stood at the foot of the stairwell, flashlight in hand. She should have walked away. But the tower felt awake, calling her. So she climbed. Each step creaked like a groan. At the top, the door to the lantern room hung open. A pale green glow pulsed from within. And the air stank of salt and rotting seaweed. The lantern was cold. Dead. But the room was not empty. The soaked journal sat on the central table, opened to the final page. I am ready now. She flipped it back. Page after page of her own handwriting, none of which she remembered writing. Maps. Coordinates. A list of names. And then, a drawing of the ghost ship. She turned slowly. The soaked man stood by the window. Only now, she saw his face. Or lack of one. Just black sockets. Water poured from them like tears. He raised a hand. Pointed to the sea. They found her shoes at the edge of the cliff. Her badge. Her flashlight. Her journal. The logbook inside the museum had one last entry, written at 4:03 a.m. Shift 4 complete. I see the light now. Locals reported seeing an old ship with torn sails moving across the cove that night. No engine. No lights. Just figures on the deck, holding lanterns. And one woman at the bow. Eyes wide. Smiling. They never found Fiona's body. The sea was searched. Boats, divers, even drones. But all they recovered was the lantern, still warm, found resting on a rock just below the cliff edge. No blood. No torn clothes. Just the lantern, burning low, the wick damp with seawater. The investigators did what they always do. Wrote up a file, cited mental health, called it a probable suicide, and quietly locked the report away in a drawer marked unresolved. The museum stayed closed for 2 weeks. Then it opened again. Quietly. No announcements. Just a new security posting listed with a temporary agency. Night shift. Must be comfortable with isolation. Mick Donnelly was 45, a former Army medic turned security guard with a bad knee and a worse divorce behind him. He didn't ask too many questions when he took the post. Just a couple overnights a week. Nothing fancy. They gave him the same brass keys. The same old logbook. Same instructions, don't go past the 3rd floor. By the 2nd night, he'd seen the stair chain move on its own. By the 3rd, he'd started hearing the horn. And by the 5th, he found something sitting on the desk when he came in from rounds. A small, leather-bound journal. Still damp. Inside, the first page read, My name is Mick Donnelly. I am trapped in the tower. There are whispers in the pubs on Skye. Old men, red-eyed from drink and salt air, tell stories no one believes until it's too late. That lighthouse isn't dead, they say. It remembers. The elders talk of a shipwreck, long before the museum, before electricity, before tourists came with cameras and maps. A black ship that went down off the coast during a storm in 1863. Some say the keeper refused to light the lamp that night. Others say the lamp was lit, but not for the living. And ever since, every few years, someone hears the horn. The sea calls someone back. And the lighthouse obeys. 1 year later, a journalist named Daria Muir came investigating the rumors for a piece in a local travel magazine. She interviewed former staff. Watched the CCTV footage that flickered and glitched at all the wrong moments. Read old logs that contradicted themselves. Then she asked to see the top floor. The curator said it wasn't open to the public. So she waited until nightfall and returned alone. She never filed her article. Only her recorder was found, abandoned at the lighthouse gate. The audio was corrupted, except for one clear section near the end. I hear it. The horn. The ship is real. I think I'm starting to remember something I never lived. Now and then, tourists say they see something strange. Not during the day, no. But at dusk, as the mist rolls in off the water, sometimes they glance toward Ardglass Point and see the lamp flicker on. Just once. And sometimes, they hear the foghorn, old and sad, carried on the wind. Some of them laugh it off. Others go quiet. And a few, the ones with eyes like Fiona's, full of ache and sleeplessness, go back up to the cliff edge at night. Just to look. Just to listen. And now and then, they don't come back down. Michael Stenmark had worked in sound all his life, but he never truly feared it until that winter. He was 43 years old, quiet by nature, the kind of man who liked crossword puzzles, old jazz on cassette, and the rhythmic hum of machines doing what they were made to do. He drank strong coffee in silence, always wore thick wool socks even indoors, and found joy in keeping Sweden's most boring equipment alive and ticking, the emergency broadcast network. Not many new people like Michael still existed. They assumed everything was automated now. But for a small stretch of northern Sweden, between the icy edge of Umeå and the villages that disappeared under snow, someone still had to manually test the system. And when budget cuts came, someone still had to drive 3 hours into the woods to check on the older, analog hardware that fed local signals into the national grid. Michael didn't mind. He liked the solitude. He liked the snow. He liked the way the world fell quiet out here, just wind and frost and the occasional reindeer in the woods. But this time, something else answered the silence. The testing station near Bjorksund wasn't a real building, just a steel-sided utility shack buried under snowdrifts, perched on a hill with no name. Inside, it was warmer than you'd expect. Clean. Functional. Metal shelves, cables, stacks of receivers, and a broadcast console that hadn't been upgraded since 1998. There were no windows. No clocks, either. Michael turned on the old console with a flick of switches and sipped from his thermos. He plugged in his headphones and brought up the calibration channel, a long stretch of empty bandwidth, clear and quiet. That's when he heard it. White noise. A low hum, like a fan spinning through gravel. Static hissing in uneven pulses. He adjusted the gain. Still there. That was unusual. The frequency, known internally as 143.760 L, was a dead one. Reserved for internal diagnostics. It wasn't meant to receive anything, and it certainly wasn't connected to public audio traffic. But something was moving inside it. Just under the surface. Michael frowned. And then he heard it. Michael. A whisper. Barely audible. Like wind sneaking through a crack in a door. He froze. Removed the headphones. Silence. He put them back on. White noise. And then again. Michael. He backed away from the console. The voice wasn't distorted or garbled. It wasn't machine-spoken or synthetic. It was his mother's voice. His mother had been dead for 9 years. That night, back at his apartment in Umeå, Michael tried to sleep but couldn't. The whisper clung to his thoughts. He replayed the recording again and again on his laptop. He ran it through spectral analysis software, filtered out background hiss, enhanced vocal spikes. What he saw chilled him. The whisper was real. Embedded in the signal. And there were other voices, too, layered, stacked, just under the static. One of them said, "Your name lives here." Another whispered, "Stay, stay, stay." He emailed the file to his backup drive, then closed the laptop. He took a hot shower, lit a candle, and tried to drown the sound in Miles Davis. But when he finally drifted to sleep, he dreamed of snow falling over radio towers, and dozens of mouths whispering his name from the sky. Michael wasn't the first to hear it. He found that out 2 days later, when he visited the archive in Luleå, an old radio bunker used by the Swedish civil defense in the Cold War. Most of it had been digitized. But Michael wanted the original reports. He found 3: 1963, 1979, and 2001. Each file came from different broadcast engineers. All 3 noted odd activity on frequency 143.760 L. Each described white noise anomalies, phantom whispers, and, most disturbingly, vocal identification. In 2001, a technician named Astrid Lind wrote, "I keep hearing myself. Over and over. My name. But also things I've never said. How do you argue with a voice that is you, but not?" She had vanished 2 weeks later. The 1979 file was more cryptic. Frequency opened something. Something speaks backward. Don't answer it. Michael photocopied all 3 files and put them in his glove box. That night, the signal came back. Clearer. And now, it said something new. "Come back. We need you." Michael tried not to go back. He told himself he was being irrational, that old equipment made strange noises, that isolation plays tricks on the ears. He even convinced himself the voice he heard was a mix of fatigue, suggestion, and maybe some undiagnosed trauma from his mother's death. But by Friday, he found himself behind the wheel again, snow hissing beneath the tires, his thermos steaming between the seats, heading north toward the hill with no name. He needed to be there. The shack's metal door groaned open like a jaw. Inside, nothing had changed. Still clean. Still humming with that barely audible drone. The console greeted him with a single green LED, steady and innocent. He sat, plugged in his headphones, opened the diagnostics. The signal was already waiting. Only now it wasn't just static. It had depth. A kind of echo that didn't fit any natural delay. The white noise came in waves, folding over itself in loops. Each pass brought back words, some distorted, others chillingly crisp. "Do you remember falling, Michael? You stood in water, didn't you? The ice broke. We were there. We watched. Say your name. Let us keep it." Michael pulled the headphones off and stared at them like they'd come alive. His pulse pounded in his throat. He hadn't told anyone about the lake. Not since he was 9 years old and fell through the ice behind his grandmother's house. He barely remembered it, just flashes. Cold like knives. A voice calling his name, even though he'd been alone. Or, he thought he had. He reached for the headphones again. And this time, he whispered. "Who are you?" The signal didn't hesitate. "We are the sound between names. We remember the ones who speak." Over the weekend, Michael didn't go out. He drew all the curtains in his flat. Stopped answering his phone. Called in sick with a vague excuse. Head pressure. Might be a sinus infection. He spent his hours recording the signal. And then, playing it backwards. What came out wasn't human. Long vowel howls, metallic gurgles, and something that sounded almost like crying. Not one voice, but hundreds, overlapping, climbing over each other like rats in a pit. But under it all was his name. Still whispering. Always whispering. Sometimes fast. Sometimes slow. Sometimes so low it vibrated his bones. And in the very center of the reversed waveform, he found something that didn't belong. A sharp spike of clean silence. Like a black hole in the middle of the data. He zoomed in until the waveform looked like a frozen mountain range. That's when his laptop shut off on its own. The lights in his apartment flickered. And in the dead quiet after, his own desktop speakers, unplugged, let out a whisper. Almost time. Monday morning, Michael put on a suit and went to the Norland Broadcasting Authority office in Ornsköldsvik. His hair was unwashed. His eyes bloodshot. He carried a thumb drive and a folder of printed logs. He met with a man named Director Holmgren, a red-faced bureaucrat with military posture and a steel wedding band he kept turning over on his pinky. Michael laid it all out. The recordings. The archived reports. The signal's progression. The names. The voices. Holmgren listened in silence. Then cleared his throat. "Michael," he said. "Do you think you're well?" "I'm not asking you to believe me," Michael said. "I'm asking you to ban the frequency." Holmgren shook his head. "That's not how it works." "I think it's not a signal at all," Michael said quietly. "I think it's a door." Holmgren stood. "That's enough." They gave Michael a leave of absence. Suggested he see a specialist. He agreed. Nodded. Smiled politely. Walked out. And went straight back to the shack in the woods. Because something was waiting. It happened at 2:44 a.m., Tuesday morning. The weather was clear. The stars were out. Michael stood in the broadcast shack alone, headphones around his neck, the console humming with anticipation. The signal had changed. It was louder now, no longer hiding in static. It pulsed like breath, rose and fell like something alive. When he leaned into the mic and whispered his name, the console lit up red. Transmission. Active. Somewhere, a channel had opened. And Michael, calm, gentle Michael, began to scream. It started as a gasp. Then it rose into a ragged, soul-ripping howl that shook the monitors and popped the audiometer. It lasted 13 seconds. It was broadcast live across the region's emergency backup channel, reaching over 30,000 radios, dozens of towers, and the government's own diagnostic servers. Then, silence. No one ever saw Michael again. The shack was empty when the officials arrived. No blood. No sign of struggle. The thermos still steamed on the desk. The headphones lay neatly coiled. The chair was warm. But Michael was gone. What they did find was the waveform. Burned into the backup drive. Labeled only. "Heard me." It contained exactly one track. And at 3 a.m., the Swedish Emergency Broadcast Network played it again, accidentally, during a routine system update. 30 seconds of white noise. And then, Michael's final scream. It made 2 radio operators quit their jobs. One had a seizure. One later told a reporter, "I saw someone crawling through the floor." The government held an emergency hearing. Frequency 143.760L was permanently retired. Weeks passed. The incident was sealed. The Swedish government issued a quiet memo to all regional broadcasters. Frequency 143.760L is no longer in service. No further testing is authorized. A replacement band was set. Security protocols were updated. But rumors began to spread. Operators at neighboring towers started hearing strange anomalies, soft sounds filtering through regular broadcasts. Moments of silence that weren't part of the script. Phantom feedback in isolated cabins. And sometimes, between automated announcements, a voice would rise in the static and say, "Michael." Once, in a snowstorm near Bowden, a patrol officer claimed he heard his own name while scanning emergency comms. He turned off the radio. The voice kept going. He broke down. Retired 3 days later. In Luleå, a retired technician named Britta Lundqvist, who had once known Astrid Lind, the woman who vanished in 2001, began digging through her old recordings. She found something she'd forgotten. A reel-to-reel tape marked, "Do not play, 143.760L, Astrid final test." The tape was brittle with age. The magnetics barely held. But she threaded it anyway. What came through made her drop her tea. At first, white noise. Then, Astrid's voice. "This is Astrid Lind, technician ID 8745. Calibrating on L-band. Receiving faint return. Possibly reflective echo from towers in Jokkmokk." She hesitates. "No. That's not an echo. No." There's a soft gasp. And then, a chorus of whispers, repeating one word. "Remember. Remember. Remember." The reel ends with a single long scream. Britta sat in her kitchen for a long time. She didn't tell anyone. She just unplugged her landline, removed every radio from the house, and started sleeping with earplugs. The shack near Bjorksund is buried now. Heavy snowfall crushed the roof that winter. No one rebuilt it. But the signal is still there. Technicians sometimes pick up phantom hums when driving past. A faint thump in the speakers. Like a heartbeat under the ice. And somewhere deeper, in a bandwidth no longer labeled on any system, a voice still calls out. Low. Patient. Saying names. Michael's voice was the latest. But not the last. Because the silent frequency is not a broadcast. It's a door. And the moment you listen too long enough to hear your own name in the hiss, you're already halfway through.